So you want to host a women's empowerment event. Kudos for you. The world needs more women's empowerment, and I'm a big believer in events to help support that vision. So in this video, you're going to learn how to host a women's empowerment event and make a living, a lucrative living doing it. So before I get into how to host a women's empowerment event, you might be wondering who I am and why I know anything about this topic. Well, in 2010, I decided to start my own conference in Miami. It was called the Women's Success Summit, and I ran this conference successfully sometimes twice a year until 2016. And by the time I retired the event, it was the largest conference for entrepreneurial women in South Florida. Now, I made this event successful by tapping into some of the strategies I'm going to share with you today. In this video, I'm going to share a whole lot of information about how to start and launch and host your women's empowerment event, starting with identifying the ideal audience for your event. Then we're going to get into how to come up with a compelling theme and get into the financial component of making sure that the event is solvent and delivers profit into your pocket. We're going to talk about format for events, including virtual formats, how to develop the content and gather the speakers for your event, how to produce the event and plan it from a production standpoint, how to market your event, and possibly most importantly, what happens after your event. So the very first question you'll want to ask yourself, and the first thing you'll want to determine, is who do you want at your event? What is the audience? Now I know it's women, but specifically what kind of women? And you'll find that especially at the beginning when you're just starting out, it's better to start with a narrower focus and then a broad one, generally speaking. So instead of just all women, you might want to think about whether you're focusing on career women, professional women, business women, mothers, older women, millennial women. So if you can get clearer about who's the ideal audience for the vision that you have, and also don't forget to think about who's the ideal audience for what comes after your event so that you have something to put people into, to enroll them into, so that this is more than just a one-time, one-and-done kind of thing. I would look at this event, I encourage you to look at it as the beginning of something, not something just complete in and of itself, but rather as the start of a conversation and the start of a potential business opportunity. Once you're clear about the audience for your event, that's a good time to start thinking about what's the theme. Now, I ran the Women's Success Summit for many years in Miami, and every single time it had the same name, the Women's Success Summit. But each time we created a new theme that gave us something to play with, because it would have gotten really boring just to have the same Women's Success Summit theme every time. Here are some examples of some of the themes we had. We had Embrace Your Destiny, Time to Shine, From Passion to Profit, and many, many more. I highly recommend having a theme because it also gives you something to put on the t-shirts and have fun with the signage and switch up your branding and your color schemes every time. So we had some standard color schemes that we used, and then with every theme, we did a little play on that same theme. So a lot of times when women are starting something like this, a women's empowerment event, they're thinking mostly of how they might serve their community, of how they might serve women and uplift them. And that is fabulous. And in my own experience, what ended up happening was because I put that first and because I put that above my own needs, I ended up burnt out and exhausted. So at this juncture, before you've gotten that far, I invite you to consider what is the business model and what is the way that this business, this event is going to drive opportunities and financial remuneration for you. So there are lots of different models, lots of different ways to generate revenues. And in fact, I've recorded whole videos just on how to make money doing events. So I invite you to check some of those out at the playlist above, and also I'm linking to it below in the comments. Another thing you'll want to think about in hosting your women's empowerment event is the format of the event, meaning how many days is it going to be? How long each day? Are you going to do it virtually? Or are you going to do it live in person? Are you going to have speakers, or are you going to be the only speaker yourself? Are you going to create panels? Do you want to have breakout sessions? These are all details that are going to impact your logistics. It'll impact your expenses, who you need to hire, and many, many other things. So the sooner you figure these things out, the easier it's going to be down the line. I personally like to give myself at least 6 months when planning a big event, and with a smaller event, you can shorten that timeline. And that's another thing you'll want to think about. How big do you want to make this thing? And one word of wisdom to those of you out here that think that a women's empowerment event has to be huge. Well, it can be huge, and that's awesome, and it can also be small. You can start small and work your way up. I found often that smaller events can be more intimate and more intensive and ultimately more impactful. So don't think that size is everything when it comes to women's empowerment events. The next thing you'll want to think about is the content of your event, aka what's the program going to look like? Are you going to have speakers, panelists? Are you going to speak yourself? Are you going to invite people in the audience to do activities? Do you want to have breakout sessions, or is everybody going to be in one general large session? One thing that I learned when I was doing this event is that it really helped for me to put out a call for speakers, because I was facing the problem of having lots of people wanting to speak at my event, but their content wasn't really relevant to what I wanted to create. And secondly, I had content that I wanted, but I didn't know who could deliver it. So I ended up doing something that was really beneficial, which was that I created a call for speakers with an application. And at the beginning of the application, I would say, this is what I'm looking for. This is the theme. These are some of the topics. Here are some of the variations you might do. And feel free to get creative and give me something else, but tell me why it relates to this theme. All of a sudden, gathering the program for the event became so much easier. Let them do the work for you, which will relieve you and release you to focus on other things like enrolling people and marketing your event and monetizing it. Once you've got some of those big strategic questions out of the way, it's time to start getting into production. And above all else, I highly recommend, especially if you're doing a live event, and especially if you're doing a live large event over multiple days, you must get an event planner. You, as the host of this event, are responsible for the audience experience, but you don't want to be responsible for every single little detail about the audience experience. I remember when I ran my very first Women's Success Summit and I didn't hire a planner. And by the end of it, I was so exhausted and so miserable, and I didn't even get to enjoy my own event. I found myself getting up on stage sometimes and letting people know that someone left their bracelet in the bathroom and that people had to move their cars because they were blocking the entrance, and all sorts of annoying logistical things that took me away from the real important purpose of the event. So some of the things you'll want to consider working out with your planner include the venue, any room blocks you might need for people traveling in from out of town, food and beverage, parking. That's a huge one that I always used to forget. Also, gathering volunteers and making sure that the registration process is smooth sailing. These are just a few little things that you'll want to think about, and there are many more that your event planner is going to help you remember. Now, even though this is the last section of this video, it is perhaps the most important. I can't tell you how many times I've witnessed somebody have this beautiful vision for a women's empowerment event and then end up with nobody showing up. It's happened again and again, and it's one of the saddest things that I've ever seen. And I want to save you from that. And so what I want to express here and what I want to emphasize is that promoting your event is your single most important job. Now, that doesn't mean that you are the only one that has to promote it, and it doesn't mean that the whole weight of all of the attendees enrolling is on your shoulders, but it is your responsibility to find the ways that you're going to fill this event if you're the one organizing it. So here are a few ways that worked really well for me. Number one, I created a beautiful website and put it out onto all the social media platforms and sent it out to every single person on my list over and over and over again. I also did something that I think was one of the smartest things I ever did, was to invite some of my closest sisters, my best friends, to come on board and become part of my board of advisors. Now, their job as my board of advisors was to advise me to make the event better and also to invite their networks. And in exchange for doing that, I gave them all VIP status, VIP access to the event. I featured them at the event, and all they had to do was enroll at least 10 people each to come to the event. Now, that was a great investment for me. I invested in their ticket, they brought people to the table. Another really smart thing to do is to enroll your sponsors into helping you fill the event. Now, you might run into a little pushback here. Why? Well, because when sponsors pay to become part of your event, they kind of expect you to do all the work of filling the event. But I found a really clever way around this. So what I did was, we had sometimes 20 or 30 or even more sponsors. I gathered them all up on a special sponsor-only call so that they could meet each other and identify ways to cross-pollinate and support each other on site at the event. And then what I did was I shared with them what would happen if each of them brought 10 women each. When we multiply 30 sponsors by 10 women, we get 300 women. And all they had to each do was commit to bringing 10. Now, some of them brought even more than that, but the idea was to get them to commit to at least that and to understand that when each of them contributed a little bit, then they all got the benefit a lot. And that ended up being one of the best things that we ever did, because we brought in ideal clients from each one of our sponsors, which ended up being a natural fit oftentimes for the other sponsors who never competed with each other. And the last thing, and possibly the most important thing, is what happens after your event. Now, very often when I was doing the Women's Success Summit, I was so thrilled to be done. I would go to bed for 3 days straight. But that was a mistake, and that was something where I left a lot of opportunity on the table. So I want you to plan for that before you even start your event. What are you going to offer to these women that have just had this incredible experience? What are you going to offer them for afterwards? The back end, or as I like to call it, the big back end. You've just invested all this time and energy and effort into creating this marvelous, intensive experience for these people. What's next? Do not leave that to chance, and don't wait until the last minute to figure it out. Make sure that you design something to offer them and offer it to them while they're there at the event having an incredible experience. I promise you'll thank me later. Now, I can only scratch the surface of what it takes to create a women's empowerment event and to do it profitably and joyfully. And so if this is something that appeals to you and you are ready to take the next step, then let's go ahead and have a conversation. Let's see if and how I might be able to help you take your vision to the next level so that you can have more freedom, more joy, more impact, and more income from your event. You can do that at superstaractivator.com/go. And you can also click on the link below.